And taken to ridiculous extremes, now it's considering this the final battle, because it's still forgetting that we have to take the castle after this despite being the most important parts. Also, excuse me, it's not Arcania calendar year 3, it's year 608 according to this fan-constructed timeline. Hardin, I don't think just because you become Emperor means you can reset the calendar. You dick. Yeah, it's been a year, but it could have been less if Godo wasn't a dick. Jeez. Anyway, how is everyone? Oh. I mean, probably, Julian. Yeah, magic potion, that'd help if you want to use that. "14 experience. It's alright, too bad I'm not using Paula. It's 24 experience for Aaron. I'm not using him. If I'm not using Paula, I'm definitely not using Aaron. Nothing really useful there. So I guess it's time to move on to conversations. Hey, what do you know? We got Katarina's conversation already. Thank you, how's everyone? Apparently, we're actually helpful. Yeah, Iris, she's the one you kind of sliced in half. Oh, it is? April 4th? When's this even gonna be posted? The 9th, I think? Yeah, the 9th. Yeah, it's the 9th, everybody. April 9th is Katarina's birthday. It's canon. According to my LP, it's canon. Wait, shit, isn't it also Piccolo Day? Hold up a sec. Oh, nope, darn it, it's May, not April. Ah, rats. Alright, what are you talking about, Jagan? Yeah, that's one hell of a to-do list we've got, so guess we've got to start with Hardin, don't we? He is the one who's going to be executing people. Yeah, he went from a person who would not execute people to a person who would, and without reason. Yeah, I mean, they do set it up as a tragedy. I'll get into it more in the next episode, but certainly it does suck. Possession plot aside, even if he was possessed, he has murdered a whole lot of people, and that's bad. But he still could have been written better. Anyway, though, here we have Sedgar. And over here on this massive battlefield, we've also got Wolf. And I can't see where Roscha or Vyland are, but, well, if half the Wolfguard's here, I'm sure the other half is as well. Unfortunately, while they did retreat the other day, they probably thought that was bullshit, and now they've merged with the main Arcanian army. Meaning, Wolf and his band are going to face us to the death here. Jagan doesn't see any way to save them, so this could very well be their final battle. Maybe that's why this chapter's titled The Final Battle, because we're about to murder the Wolfguard. Yeah, that's gotta suck. Everyone's just like, fuck Hardin. Altia kicks ass, actually. Those are some cool dudes over there. Maybe that would have scared me 5 chapters ago, but here in Chapter 19, no problem. Alright, so this is yet another map that was used in Shadow Dragon. I like this one a lot more though for a multitude of reasons, one of which is we have fewer Bullistae, though there are still some here, and none of them are Jake, so we don't have to get Seda in to recruit any of them. That being said though, we have a few soft time limits here. As you can see back there, some thieves are moving towards that village, and that village is very important. We want to, at the very least, save it as quickly as possible, and although this is a large battlefield, those thieves will make it to the village pretty quickly, and Marth's pretty far away. At the very least, try to get somebody over to cover the village before the thieves get there. Minerva's probably a better option because she'll at least be equal to the axe fighters here, which, by the way, on Lunatic, there is 1 extra axe fighter, I want to say? Yeah, 1 extra. In addition, there are also 3 extra paladins and 2 extra horsemen near Sedger, so a lot more units, and oh man, when reinforcements start coming in, there are going to be Wyvern riders everywhere. And according to War of Dragons, the maximum number of enemies per map is 60, so like, you can actually max out on enemies so more won't spawn in this chapter, which is kind of wild. The horsemen will attack you very... well, they're not horsemen, they're paladins. Horsemen are a specific class. But anyway, yeah, make absolutely sure to stay out of Sedger's range for the time being. You do not want him approaching you. In addition, this is the other soft time limit I was talking about. After a few turns, Vyland is going to enter the field. I believe this is about the point at which the Wyvern Riders start spawning, apparently. So yeah, now we have the other soft time limits, Vyland's approach. You might be able to figure out why we're going to this village now, because we definitely want to save the village. It's a very important village. You want to save them in general, of course, so it's not too out of the ordinary, and those thieves, like I said, are very quick. That being said, though, Vyland's entered the field and we really don't want to kill him, which is a similar reason to why we don't want Sedger waltzing over to us, because he absolutely will aggro on you. Avoid that. I probably could be doing better. Like I said, a pretty good choice to send over is, of course, Minerva. To negate all of these time limits, you could always just have somebody warp Marth over to the village, and quite frankly, I'm pretty sure Marth could survive an onslaught of fighters by this point. Now, if the Wyvern Riders do spawn when Vyland appears, that means you're going to want to get them out of there quickly. And Vyland does enter the field pretty quickly, so you're not going to have a lot of time. So, if you want to go with the warp strategy, at least on Lunatic, make sure to be quick about it, otherwise you could be in some serious trouble, and damn it, I did not want that guy aggroing on me, that's bad actually. 'Cause Sedger, hoo boy, he's pretty close. Oh whoops, I sped up this conversation it seems. Oh well. You can still read that, right? I probably read it in a slow, dramatic voice, so it's slow enough to read, I hope. This is why I hate houses in Fire Emblem. It makes LPing a pain in the ass because then I have to pay attention to what I'm cutting. And as it stands, there's already so much dialogue in this chapter, on top of an already really long chapter. To be honest, it makes editing this kind of a pain in the ass. Oh well, maybe I'll edit it in post and you'll just have to deal with me not talking. I know, terrifying, right? Oh well, anyway, I know Rise doesn't have a lot of defense, but you really made a poor decision there, buddy. Well, actually, maybe not the poorest decision, because Vyland's getting pretty close. Thankfully, though, by going to this village, we recruit Roscha. Oh, by the way, I'm not going to be showing it off because it would involve killing him off in the previous chapter, but if Roscha is dead by this point, you just get a villager who's like, man, it sure sucks that Roscha is dead. Have a vulnerary. I might post the dialogue, but even on my alternate file I'm not going to show that off because I actually don't have any open save slots, unfortunately. Anyway, Roscha. Okay, I'm going to try not to repeat myself too much, but one important thing to note here is this is the point of the game in which availability really screws over a lot of units. Shima was definitely teetering on that edge if she hadn't already fallen in anyway, but any character from this point onwards is absolutely at the point where they don't really have many advantages because you don't get to use them for long. For the most part, a few of them have some interesting points, but Roscha's not really one of them. His base stats are kinda mediocre, his weapon ranks really aren't good enough at this point in the game, because you're going to have somebody with a better lance rank. His growth rates are actually pretty good though. Like, look at those. Those are all fairly solid. I'd like to see a little more strength out of him because luck isn't the best growth rate to have, but he's also got good HP, which guarantees that at the very least he'll be an HP sponge. However, he starts at level 8, which only leaves him 12 levels of training. Unless you really want to power level him in Arena or Drill Grounds, there's really not much you can do to make Roscha worth using. Alright, so let's have Roscha charge forward because we're kind of between a rock and a hard place here. Vyland's approaching and we don't have a lot of room to move about thanks to Sedgar. So honestly, that was a pretty smart strategy for that horseman. We're going to have to make a wall here to prevent Vyland and his goons from approaching anybody who's maybe a little squishier. God, you are so bad at hitting targets, my dude. Of course, then again, it's good that he didn't, because not liking that damage on Sirius. Sirius can be pretty good, but that is a bit limited thanks to his pre-promote status. Alright, so, we've got to go recruit Vyland. First, though, let's clear the rabble a little bit. Thankfully, Roscha is a paladin, so once you recruit him, it's easy enough to get him caught up to the rest of the group. Now, keep in mind, Roscha's the only person who can recruit Vylands. However, Roscha can't recruit any of the other Wolfguard. Yeah, it was so short. It was like less than a minute. You talked to Marth briefly, then rode out to speak to Vyland. God. It was so short you've had time to speak to nobody else other than Marth. Well, Roscha, I guess you're the only person in this group who's not a dick. Okay, so first, let's talk about Vyland. Whereas Roscha had at least some potential to be good if he were at least introduced a little earlier, Vyland is, unfortunately, a little worse. He does have some better base stats than Roscha, but overall, none of them are that much better. He only has slightly better strength and defense, but that's pretty much where the improvements stop. He also has more middling growth rates than Roscha does, which is a bit of a shame. Now, on one hand, he has growth rates that in spots are better in some of Roscha's weaker areas, but not by so much that it's going to make a huge difference. For example, he's got better strength, but only by 10%. Now, Roscha's growth rates don't really give him that much of a specialization, but he's still got more than Vyland does, which is to say, not really much of anything at all. He'll be very middle of the road. I think one of the best parts about him is that he has an equal sword and lance weapon rank, which doesn't usually happen on most characters, but like I've been saying, you've got characters with better weapon ranks in at least one of those. Probably not the same character, sure, but do you really need somebody with a max rank in more than one weapon? So, the thing about this is, in the original Mystery of the Emblem, Roscha was the only recruitable member of the Wolfguard. You did have to kill the rest. None of them defected. Which I think is interesting to a certain extent. However, I know I joke about actual literal demon Hardin a lot, but like, I legitimately can't suspend my disbelief for Hardin, because he does look like an actual demon. Now, they do try to give the Wolfguard a reason for following Hardin for so long, and it is actually pretty well done. I do like the idea of sort of having to kill old comrades. You know, a lot of this game is about fighting old comrades in general, you know. A lot of them start on Arcania's side, but then you have to recruit them. But the idea that there are some who are so loyal to a certain person that they won't join you is an interesting one. But I don't think it's effective here. Again, because I cannot suspend my disbelief for Hardin. Now, I do, however, like some of the arguments that the Wolfguard get into. Roscha is able to speak to Vyland, because the two are fairly close, and therefore Roscha's admittedly kinda weak appeal to emotion actually works on him. But at the same time, Vyland also appeals to emotion, but in a way that's a little bit different. He reacts with a lot more confusion, and Sedgar picks up on that a lot more, whereas Roscha is a lot more direct. He knows what he's doing is right. There's not that much character to the Wolfguard outside of this, but at the same time, I can actually believe that Roscha would not appeal to Sedgar. However, Vyland and Sedgar share a lot of the same confusion, and that's what allows Sedgar to realize that, indeed, he's not following the same Hardin. I can't talk too much more, because we'll have to go into Sedgar's stats, but after that... You know, I remember Sedgar and Wolf being super broken in Shadow Dragon, because at the time, they were actually good pre-promotes that joined really early on in the game. Here, though, Sedgar's still a fairly good pre-promote. He's got some good base stats, and his growth rates are overall really good. But we're almost at the end of the game, and he's only got 10 levels to gain anyway. I really don't have much to say about Sedgar otherwise. His HP is good as always, and his skill and speed are both really good. And his skill and speed have both the good base and growth, so he'd do really well if you got time to use him. I do much prefer this version of things, because, again, can't suspend my disbelief for Hardin, but their excuses to why the Wolfguard didn't leave in the first place makes them seem less stupid. Like, I joked about it in the last chapter, but god, it does seem like they're super bucking dumb, because Hardin is just so unimaginably evil. But that being said, while it's certainly not, like, a good thing here, it's clearly a mistake they've made. It's bad that they followed Hardin for so long, but at the same time, it's because Hardin does mean everything to them, and so the idea of Hardin being evil is difficult for them to grasp. Sedgar finally came to terms with the fact that no, he's not serving the same man. He's had his doubts, but he's just lied to himself to try and move on. But at this point he realizes that no, he can't keep it up. He does have to defect. And, you know, if the game had actually set up a scenario like this properly, I wouldn't actually mind the mystery of the Emblem version. You know, it's setting up a tragedy, which a lot of this is. Like, the events in this game are referred to as the War of Heroes, because a lot of it is former heroes fighting each other because of Arcania. And in a game that had set that up better and didn't rely on a possession plot, and Hardin just being instantly and completely evil, like, it would have done a lot better at that sort of plot, I think. But because they did this with it, Hardin is undeniably evil, and, you know, again, there is a certain tragedy to it. Like Jagan says, Darksphere know what he's done is horrendous. Though, then again, to be fair, I did forgive Quanda Rosman to a certain extent in Suikoden for what he'd done. Again, I don't mind Suikoden's mind control plot because they kind of wanted the generals to do horrible things, but then they also wanted you to recruit them. And while it's not like the cleanest way to do a plot, at the very least, I can separate their actions from the actual person there, and they're interesting to a certain extent, but here, I don't know, just, it feels like it's the usual possession plot fare, like with Kain in Final Fantasy IV, in which they want to have sort of a gray morality scenario to a certain extent without trying to find an actual way to make it compelling or to make it feel natural. It's kind of just a cheap way to do that sort of thing. Like, you take this character, and they would not normally do this thing. Like, obviously, Hardin was a good man in Shadow Dragon, and I still argue that he's one of the best written characters in that game. It's not a high bar, and it doesn't mean much in the long run, but it's very clear that he is a good person in Shadow Dragon, so obviously he wouldn't start a war. There's no reason for him to. But because there's no reason he would create a conflict, they then have to take drastic measures and say, oh, there are certain aspects of his personality that he would not normally act upon, but a thing happens and they come out. In Kain, it's just like, I'm possessed by a man in big armor who is possessed by a kite man. Here it's, Garneth gave Hardin an orb, and then all of his negative aspects came to the surface, and he became evil. Rather than setting up a plot in which, like, there are reasons that Leader A, or I want to say Country A, might act one way in the first game and a different way in the second game. I will say, despite its problems, Radiant Dawn does actually do a few interesting things in regards to its initial setup. Again, I won't talk too much about that, but especially since it's kind of spoiler-y for Path of Radiance. But nonetheless, while it does kind of flub a lot of landings, Radiant Dawn does at least have some interesting plot points. Here, though, no. They clearly realized that there was no reason for Hardin to be evil, so they forced the issue to have this idea that's pretty cool, but one in which they really couldn't do much of anything with it because it was a possession plot, and because you recruit most of the characters anyway. It's really tragic that we're fighting our old friends, but then we immediately recruit our old friends. And anyway, Wolf, I think, is actually the most interesting of the lot, because he knows full well that Hardin is evil, but he's so loyal that he doesn't give a shit. But Sedgar remembers one important thing, and he brings up a very important point. I feel this is a good bit of backstory. It's one we never got into in Shadow Dragon, but here it's brought up. Well, it's introduced for the first time, really, but I do really like this, because Sedgar just brings up the fact that Wolf isn't really serving Hardin by serving him, because this isn't Hardin. It's his body, but it's not his ideals anymore. And Wolf has just been refusing to believe that all this time, but Sedgar brings it up, and it clearly pains him a lot, but he has to kill Hardin. I do really wish they got more into the Wolfguard and Shadow Dragon, because they do in this game, and I really like their dynamic, and God, I wish there was so much more to it that they had introduced previously to make this more tragic. Anyway, though, I didn't actually look at Wolf, but let's look at Wolf now before the action continues. Hey, you know how Sedgar was pretty good? Wolf is really good. He has some overall fairly solid base stats, and while his skill isn't as high as Sedgar's, he does trade it for a really good strength growth rate. Wolf would be a really great character, except he's level 12. You've got 8 levels left. Good luck. Okay, so, Marth just crit a man to death. We've now talked about the Wolfguard. Now, past me seems very impatient, but you have to understand, this is actually a pretty difficult section of this map. So, we already have a lot of units, but once you step into the area, a lot more spawn in. And it's hard enough to deal with these guys on normal mode. It should go without saying, but Lunatic adds a whole lot more spawns. Like, I'm looking at the map, it seems to be 3. I'm pretty sure all of the Wyvern Riders spawn when Vyland do, but if they don't, you also have some flying in from the other corners of the map. That being said, though, I think they would spawn with Vyland, because, quite frankly, they spawn from the bottom left, the bottom right, and the top right. That doesn't seem nearly close enough to effectively add any difficulty to this segment, whereas the new spawn points are all on fortresses in Lunatic mode. Anyway, though, thank God for the physics and fortify staffs, huh? They're really goddamn helpful. Because, man, healing is bad enough as it is in this section. But I was at least able to keep everyone healthy, so we should be able to survive this onslaught, though, because it's so hard to reach the bottom left, there are a lot of units that are effectively pretty tough. That being said, I got stupidly lucky against that knight right there. He had a really good opportunity to hit Marth, but he managed to miss with an 81. I will admit, this was definitely a lucky turn. It's hard to strategize around this just because there are so many units to deal with, and you also have to deal with recruiting Wolf as well. Unless you want to play the classic way and kill him off along with the rest of the Wolfguard minus Roscha, but there's really no reason to do that. Like I said, the Wolfguard have clearly fucked up, but I think they managed to write it in such a way where it's kind of understandable. It is more them fooling themselves into serving him. Not because they necessarily think he's right, but because they'd prefer to serve him than to do anything else. I mean, it makes sense. Like, their backstory is that, like, they were former slaves that Hardin freed, and then they swore loyalty to him. But, you know, then Orb happened, and now he's not, and they can't accept that. God. Honestly, even if this were better written, I feel like recruiting the Wolfguard would actually make sense. Even if Hardin weren't possessed, but they had actually managed to write the game in such a way that he was an opposing person, or like, even if he was an opposing country or the ruler of one, whatever. I do not know how to word this for some reason, but like, even if he had actually good reasons for being quote-unquote evil, which, if he had actual reasons, I feel like you wouldn't even be able to call him evil per se, but regardless, I feel like there was a way to write this in which they could still come to the realization that they weren't truly following Hardin anymore, and then you could kind of have both. Like, if it were really well written, you could go either direction, and it would be fine. It would just be really nice if they actually wrote it well. Actually, though, now that I think about it, it is actually it is nice that the Wolfguard thing is so well written, because, like, for the most part, the extra writing they've added to this game hasn't been the best. It was mainly the prologue that I really liked, but then a lot of the assassin stuff wasn't as strong. Actually, no, even in that regard, I like the assassins as well. I just don't think Klein is a redeemable villain, despite the fact that they do try to make her one at the end. But the rest of it is okay. I have problems with Aramaya, but we'll talk about that later. But you know what? Actually, I'm gonna say that other than Klein, on a whole, this game's, like, new writing is actually pretty solid. Actually, no, there's also stuff with the Avatar as well that people don't like. You know what? We'll talk about this game's, like, new writing later. New mystery of the writing, because that is a point of contention for a lot of people, and I haven't really brought up the stuff they don't like, but it'll probably come up. Anyway, though, here's Boa. Oh no! Boa, he's injured. Ah. Oh, cool. So you ruined everything then, huh? Well, thanks, Boa. I mean, I disagree completely, but whatever. Hey, yeah, decision cost us dearly, but what choice do we have? I don't know, maybe this whole thing's bullshit? I don't know, New Mystery of the Emblem. I feel like you're telling me that monarchy is bullshit and leads to bad things happening. I don't know. That's quite the hot take, though. I don't know. Just like traditional gender roles being stupid, it's just... This idea that you've presented to me is just... It's so complex, it's out of my league in thinking. I don't know if I can figure this out. Yeah, you fucked up pretty hard. Not to say all the blame is on Boa, but you do suck a lot, Boa. I've been mentioning a lot that basically every character in Arcania joins you. To be completely honest, I did think I was correct, but I wasn't. While Boa does appear in the Arcania Saga chapters, you don't recruit him here. He's the only character in all of Arcania who doesn't join you, because he fucking dies. And unlike the Wolfguard, the writers didn't care to save him, and quite frankly, I agree. I don't give a shit about Boa either. He's the worst.